Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good afternoon from the Batcave. It is, I think it's Friday, October 10th, 2022, and I'm sorry, 2024. And we have we're kicking it through First Kings, and I'm going to start a new playlist here. This is going to be called The Decline and Fall of Israel and Judah. And so this one is going to go, and it's going to incorporate all the prophets that are going to be up till the destruction of the temple. And then I'm going to pick up after that with the essentially Chronicles and all the prophets that come after, and I'm probably going to include Ezekiel and Daniel and those prophets that come after, because they are technically part of the exile, even though they start their prophesying before Jerusalem is destroyed. So this is going to basically cover all the prophets, and first it's going to cover 1st and 2nd Kings, and then all the prophets except for Ezekiel, Daniel, Zechariah, Haggai, and Malachi. Those are going to be attached to Ezra and Nehemiah, and I'm going to do Esther with all that too. That's going to be the Jerusalem and exile period. So this 1st and 2nd Kings actually fly by pretty fast. And if you know where the prophets go, there's very clearly an unbroken tradition of prophets. So you don't want to think like, well, who was keeping records? And you don't want to listen to any dogma that's saying, well, these guys probably put these things together and they revised this history and cobbled it together. There very clearly is a record. If you read First and Second Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, they keep referring to prophets that they're getting this history from. And then of course we have the prophets who write books that are interspersed within this history, and there really are no gaps. There's a non-stop tradition of prophets keeping track of things, and we see groups of prophets from the time of Samuel forward, and they keep mentioning a lot of generic prophets who aren't named, and then groups of prophets. So we know that there were, if you will, schools of prophets, this is unfortunately going to be abused today, where you have prophetic schools where people are going to get you to pay them to learn to get the anointing juju and all that stuff. Unfortunately, it abuses that kind of stuff. But the reality is that there were schools of prophets. There were groups of prophets who would get together and commune in the Holy Spirit. We know they kept records. We know they wrote stuff. We have numerous of them mentioned right in the scriptures. I can think of just about, I think, 5 of them that are mentioned just between the lives of David and Solomon. They don't get as specific after that because they're probably drawing after that from the Book of Kings, which is the final compilation of those prophets. And I expect that the final editor on that is Jeremiah and Baruch, I would expect. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with why Solomon had a downfall, and then we're going to keep an eye on 2 things as we go through these. One is going to be the high places in Israel. And when you see high places here, I want your discernment meter to go, that means borrowing tradition from the world and not getting rid of it. Okay, so your New Testament parallel to that is the Greek philosophy that we synced in with it. And then you're going to have the same thing in Israel. It's going to be the bull gods. And those are Apis bulls, and what it is a false trinity. That's what the Apis bull is. It's that bull with the sun disk and then the serpent coming out of it. It's literally a fake father, fake son, fake spirit. And it's something they got from Egypt, and they probably contributed to that idea forming in Egypt because it seems to have popped up in the time that the Jews were in Egypt. So they seem to have been taking the bull of heaven with the sun god, which is kind of, that goes all the way back to the pre-flood era with the Shamash sun god, which is probably based on, honestly, the son of righteousness. It was probably a corruption of, how the Bible uses the sun to represent Christ as a type. And then you see it wrapped around the hunter. So you're going to see the hunter in a sun disk. And Apollo, the god Apollos or Apollyon from the Antichrist, is going to be the clearest example of that. But when you see these guys with wings, those wings are supposed to represent the rays of the sun, and you see a guy with a bow with wings often in ancient reliefs. It's most prominently going to be in Asher. They're just going to name it Asher, but it looks like somebody who was probably bootlegged from Nimrod. That would be my assumption. And then the bull of heaven is going to be, again, the bull who's really in charge of impregnating the woman to create Nephilim. It's the whatever fallen angel is doing that. And what you probably have is somebody equating that with a false Christ type. And so that's why the bull gets equated with God, the son gets equated with the Son of God, and then the spirit gets replaced with the serpent, because the serpent becomes metaphorical in a lot of different cultures for wisdom. Remember, the serpent was more subtle than any of the living creatures. And so what they're doing is they're taking subtlety in terms of deceptiveness and replacing that with wisdom. So the Holy Spirit equates with wisdom, and then they're going to say, well, then the serpent is going to be our version of the Holy Spirit. And then they're going to unite those three together to make a kind of trinity in the Apis bowl. And so they're going to have that in northern Israel. So it's almost like you have these high places, which is really kind of like the academy. It's really the false, priesthood that started with Pythagoras and got absorbed into the church through the Alexandrians primarily. And then you're going to have the false trinity, which is based on a monad and a monad and a dyad. And if you read some of the early church fathers, especially the guys who followed Origen in that, they were definitely calling it a monad and a dyad. They were calling Jesus the dyad. They were calling Jesus like kind of part male, part female, and try to make him both the Holy Spirit and Jesus. And you don't really have a clear Trinitarian doctrine established that is equivalent to what we have today, really till towards the end of the 4th century. And even still, it's very much rooted in the Pythagorean triad. Very much, because these guys are reading Philo, and Philo is very much a Pythagorean. So anyways, those are kind of the New Testament equivalent of these two big fat errors that stay in Israel. And you want to look for these parallels between Israel and the church, because we kind of walk through similar deceptions and corruptions that Israel went through, which is why we end up in what the reformers called the Babylonian captivity of the church, which is, man, now the church is basically run by the Pope, and the Pope is basically a French puppet by the time you get to, I think, the 1300s. They called it the Babylonian captivity of the church. And, you're going to see parallels between the Reformation and Ezra and those guys, where they come out and they're reading the word, but they're racist and they're misapplying it. And then, we're going to get to this Philadelphian era where the church is evangelical again, which is good. And you're going to see those parallels in Israel, kind of with Jesus coming. Jesus and John the Baptist coming and actually evangelizing the good news, but then they get rejected, and then the church that remains is the Make Israel Great Again Laodicean version of Israel, and then they run into their own destruction. So look for those parallels as we're going through this, but those main two things, they're going to keep repeating those throughout 1 Kings, and they never got rid of the high places, and they never got rid of the bulls, and it's always going to be what leads them back into corruption, even when they have short-term revivals. So starting with Solomon, it says, now Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh. So the daughter of Pharaoh was his first wife. Then he has the Ammonite, the Edomite, the Sidonian, and Hittite women from various nations, concerning which the Lord said to the sons of Israel, you shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after other gods. Solomon held fast to those in love. So again, when he's saying, I'm going to go to the King James and look at a cross-reference here, you shouldn't associate with them, the specifics is they're talking about the Sidonians and Hittites, the Canaanites. That's who they say not to marry. It doesn't say, it does say the Moabite and the Ammonite can't come into the congregation until I think it's the 10th generation or something like that. But you got to remember, there are obviously exceptions to this, because Rahab would have been a Canaanite and Ruth was a Moabite. So there are exceptions to this. But the point is that they're coming into Israel. You're not making marriages where you're having a union with their family and your family to form treaties with them. And that's what Solomon's doing. This is the big thing that God doesn't want. So it says, of the nations concerning which the Lord said to the children of Israel, you shall not go in after them. So again, he's not necessarily saying all of these nations are nations that they're forbidden to marry from, but these ones are, and he is marrying into the nations that he forbid. And you're going to find it's specifically the Canaanite ones that seem to really turn him. And it says he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. And it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon walked after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians. So again, Ashtoreth is Ashtoreth or Ishtar, mother of the Nephilim. And Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Milcom is, what it seems like, is that Milcom is either Molech or Marduk. It's one of these two. It sounds more like Molech, and there's some scholarly disagreement. Molech, from what I can tell, is a deity that is based on a corruption of when Abraham sacrificed Isaac. There's not a clear history behind Molech. We don't find Molech outside of Canaan. We don't find a lot of archaeological evidence of Molech. These pictures you have of people putting, babies on a bull with his hands and they burn them. We know there's something involved with burning infants and Molech. That's all we really know from the Bible. But what we don't know is, what did Molech look like and where did he come from? And what I found when I look up the language itself, Molech seems to have something to do with the sacrifice. And it's specifically a burnt sacrifice. And you don't have this existing before Abraham offers up. Remember, he's asked to offer up Isaac as a burnt sacrifice. Well, he does that in the mountains of Canaan. That's where he does it. And then he obviously comes back with Isaac, but there's 2 other young men with him. And we don't have any, I can't give you an exact story, so this is just a hypothesis. It seems like those 2 young men understood what Abraham was going to do, because obviously they're going to make a sacrifice. There was no animal with them. They might have heard the story afterwards of how the ram replaced Isaac as a sacrifice, or they might have just believed he sacrificed Isaac, but Isaac was fine because of God. Because even in Hebrews, it says that Abraham believed that God could raise him from the dead. So there's a likelihood that those 2 men that were with them might have thought he actually went through and sacrificed Isaac, but God raised him from the dead. And, roughly 150 years later, Isaac's children are ruling Egypt, his children and grandchildren. So my theory is this rumor. Remember, this is going to be over the course of about a couple hundred years, and then they're going to be in Egypt for another couple hundred years. It's like 210 to 230 years, and then they come out and people are worshiping this Milcom. And my theory is that Molech and possibly Milcom. This could be a version of Molech, or it could be a version of Marduk. But basically, some people put it together that, hey, this guy did this thing where he sacrificed his son as a burnt offering, and now his children are ruling over the most powerful empire in the world, like their God status. And remember, it's during that time that Israel's ruling over Egypt that Egypt is going to conquer Canaan. So what might be is that somebody looked to that, because remember, Abraham had Ammonite friends and allies, and he had all kinds of servants who would have been mixing and mingling with people in the region, that the story gets corrupted and they start trying to do religiously what Abraham was asked to do specially, and they don't have the whole story, and they think sacrificing your kids as a burnt offering leads to blessings. That's what it seems to be, because there isn't this clear cult of Molech that we can go, okay, here's Molech, here's this god, here's what he was based on, here's what he looked like, and here's how they worshipped him. It's just the child sacrifice. That's all we know. We just know there was a cult of child sacrifice. And we don't really have other cults of child sacrifice that we can identify in Sumer and Egypt and stuff. We don't have things like that at the time. It only arises in this place where Abraham was asked to offer up Isaac. So it's kind of strange to me when I get to Jeremiah and God says they're sacrificing their children. Never did that enter into my mind, when there's no evidence of people doing that before God told Abraham to do it. Now, he obviously is, when God says, never did that enter into my mind, he's eternal. It's not like he would never have any idea that anyone was going to do anything like that. But what he's saying is, I don't want that. I never asked that, nor did I consider asking that. Okay, what he does with Abraham is the test. And he clearly, because remember, he's already told him that his ancestry is going to come, or his descendants are going to come through Isaac, and then he tells him to sacrifice Isaac. And the author of Hebrews said Abraham did it because he reasoned that God could raise him from the dead. Okay, so he had faith in the power of God to keep his promise despite him being asked to sacrifice Isaac. So that's why he went to go through with it. But it's clearly just a test. So obviously God is when he's saying that never entered into my mind, he's not saying I was ignorant that people might do something like that or might corrupt something. But what you're going to find if you study ancient history well, and this is hopefully I'm going to get a lot of this stuff out in my Serpent by the Way book, it's after these things, what Satan seems to get people doing on the earth always seems to be a corruption of what God is doing. It always seems to be a corruption of what God has done or what God has revealed through a prophet. It doesn't ever seem to be anything original. Satan never seems to be coming up with anything original. And what he does in the short haul is he turns what God did in this one instance. It would be like somebody going around going, if everybody who's blind, like, put mud in their eyes and spit in them, because Jesus did that and somebody was healed. Well, Jesus did what he did to demonstrate something, because if you look at the Gospel of John, he's constantly demonstrating that he's God. And God created us from mud, and so he uses mud and spit to heal this guy's eyes, because he was the original creator of the eyes, creating them from mud, from the clay, from the dust of the earth. He didn't need the mud. He did it. Everything he's doing in John is demonstrating that he's God. He's walking on water. He's God. He's just again and again and again. It's just they're types of things that he's doing that the Old Testament should be telling you this is God. You have people in like the NAR and the Bethel movement will copy things that were done. That's why they do things like 24/7 prayer and these crazy nonstop worship fests at IHOP Kansas City. Why do they do that? Because David had 24/7 musicians at the temple, and he was blessed. So therefore, wait. David organized that, and he didn't have a temple, remember? And you had singers doing the temple thing for a time, but it seems like it fell off pretty quick, because not too long after that, they're going into false worship and stuff. How long did they maintain that? I don't know, but David ordered that up. Okay? David wasn't blessed because of that. And see, what they do is they take the action and they say, he did this and he was blessed, therefore if I do that, I'll be blessed. No. Abraham obeyed the word of the Lord and he was blessed. So if you obey the word of the Lord, you'll be blessed. Not if you copy the thing that Abraham did. That's the message of the Bible, is listen to and obey the word of the Lord. Don't copy the thing that some other person did and was blessed. And that's why you don't have Jesus doing miracles the same way twice. The only miracle he repeats in all of the Gospels, and this is hands down all miracles in the Bible, the only repeat miracles in the whole Gospel, and they're not really repeat, is Moses getting water from a rock, because he was supposed to speak to it the second time, because those are types of the first and second coming of Jesus, because Paul says Christ is the rock. And the 2 feedings with loaves and fishes, because those are types of the Old and New Covenant. It's the only things he ever does a repeat miracle. You do have the Jordan parting twice, and that's symbolic, but it's a different way it's parted. When you see things that match, it's a big deal, because it's meant to be a connection that you're supposed to look into and understand. It's not how to do the miracle. And so that's why Jesus is constantly doing miracles in different ways. It's what he's doing and how he does the miracle is demonstrating things that usually have a typological reference to his deity. But Jesus is going to say, your faith made you whole, or your faith has saved you. And what he's saying is, faith comes by hearing the words of Christ. He's God, so that's the word of God. And so if he says something and you believe it, and therefore you believe, we know he can heal, all we need to know if he's willing to heal. And he says, if you're willing, you can make me whole. And Jesus says, I'm willing, be whole. It's believing the word of God. It's trusting in what he says that has the power, if you will. Okay? Why? Because it's his power. And he wants to show himself mightily to those who trust him. It has nothing to do with the how-to. It's the person. It's the person, and it's what he said. And it's the fact that he said it is the basis of all faith. So if you have faith, you can move mountains. What does that mean? It means if God tells you move that mountain, or if God tells you go there, and there's a mountain in your way, speak to the mountain and it will move, because God said, let us go to the other side. This storm's not going to stop us from getting to the other side. That's why he says, where is your faith? Okay? So that would be my assumption on where Moloch or Milcom comes from. And I'm assuming Milcom is just, this probably happened before the Tower of Babel, and Milcom and Molech are just two different languages, ways of saying the same thing. That would be my assumption. There's some scholars that agree, there's some scholars that disagree. Marduk also popped up around this time, and I think Marduk was just, I think it's just an Akkadian way, either an Akkadian or Sumerian way of saying Amartu, because that's what it is Amartu. And I think Amartu and Mari are just, whoever this is, it's the father of the Amorites. And he gets deified. I think that's who Marduk is. So I don't think the Ammonites would have any reason to be worshiping the forefather of not the Ammonites, but the Amorites. So I'm assuming this is Molech. So that's a lot to say. These are two things that were based on things that happened in Abraham's day, and they got corrupted after the Tower of Babel. That's where they came from. But now Solomon's worshiping them because they've turned into cults that mean different things. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. See, David, it's not that David didn't screw up. God was his only God. When he sinned, he said, against you and against you alone have I sinned. Why? Because God's his only God. He's still following fully after God. He just sinned before God. And that's why it's going to say in the New Testament, those who are of the light come to the light so that their deeds may be exposed, that they were wrought or worked in God. What does that mean? It means I either sinned before God or I did righteousness before God, but I did it before God. I'm not trying to hide it. That's what it means. So if I come to God and get my deeds reproved, God's right, I'm wrong. Point is, I'm not hiding anything from God that I'm doing. David tried to hide something from men that he was doing, but when God caught him, I'm caught. I did it. God saw it. And so that's why he is accounted as going fully after the Lord, even though he did an evil thing. Solomon is he's now getting into multiple gods. He's worshiping multiple gods. And the idea is you have different gods that are over different nations. And remember when we're looking at guys like Jephthah, when he's saying, hey, you guys have what your god Milcom gave to you. That's it's in Judges something, 10, 12, something like that. But he's saying, or when he's fighting the Moabites, it's not Milcom, it's Chemosh. He's saying too. That's their version of whoever their national god is. But he's saying, you guys have the land that your god Chemosh gave to you. In other words, you weren't able to drive out Og, king of Bashan, and whatnot. So obviously, Chemosh didn't want you to have more land than you have. That's why you have what you have. But our God was able to drive out Og, king of Bashan. So that's why we have the land now. Well, same thing. You're going to have these multiple gods of these multiple nations. Well, now Solomon is married in with those nations. And his wives feel they need to pray to these gods to be blessed because that's their national god. And they want their people blessed and yada, yada, yada. And so what they're doing is they're joining their gods with Yahweh. And there's absolutely no difference between this and the church joining Pythagorean and Platonic philosophy and with Christian theology. There's no difference because they do have another god. They call that god the monad or the nous. And what you find is that the church is saying, oh, yeah, the nous is God, the monad is God, our God too. And it's not their God. It's a different God with different attributes, different characteristics. And it came by their own speculation through their poets. But the Christians decided that these people were divinely inspired, so they believed them. So they said, so Solomon did build a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill which is before Jerusalem, and Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. So see how he says Molech here and Milcom there? It seems like they're just different ways of saying the same thing. And my guess would be that would be Canaanite and that would be Ammonite. That would be my guess. And he says, and likewise he did for all his strange wives or all his foreign wives, which burnt incense and sacrifice to their gods. So he basically said, I got all these wives are princesses from these other countries, and they all have their priesthoods that they're, doing their homage to, so we're going to build temples for all of them. So they'd be happy. Now remember, his wife, his Egyptian wife, pretty much has her own town. She has a fancy house, almost as fancy as Solomon's, in her own town. And then her dad just comes into Canaan and he sacks another town and gives it to her. So they're not just a harem of women living in a giant house that Solomon has, like the king of Persia has. These are royalty from their own nations, and these are political unions. And in a lot of cases, these women have their own houses. And they have their own temples, and they have their own gods. And Solomon basically just peruses through town sleeping with all of them. It's not like they're all just living in his house. He probably doesn't have any of them living in his house unless he's calling them to him to sleep with them for a time. But he's got 300 concubines. So I would imagine his wives all have their own place. So anyways, he said, and God was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared to him twice. So remember, God appears to him twice and spoke to him. Visible, audible, you've seen God. And yet, you're going after these other gods. Ain't no excuse for this. God didn't appear to David. He shows up before Solomon builds the temple and says, I'm going to give you wisdom and all this blah da 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 da. And then he shows up again when he builds the temple and he's like, I'm going to chill in this temple. How do you like me now? And Solomon's like, cool, we're going to go get some other gods up the street. No. And commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods. He told him specifically about this. But he kept not which the Lord commanded. Wherefore the Lord said to Solomon, for as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee and give it to thy servant. So I'm going to tear the kingdom from you. Solomon is not the subject of the seed of David promise. Everything Solomon has is because of David. It's not because of Solomon. It's because of David. This is why he says, notwithstanding, in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake. Just like the Jews are blessed because of the forefathers, not because of themselves. They're blessed because of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Solomon is blessed because of David, not because of himself. Because God made a promise to David, or God made a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their heirs and descendants are privy to a blessing, but that blessing has caveats to it. Solomon is not the one who says, my love will not depart from him, I'll chasten him with the rods of man. That belongs to Jesus and those who are in Jesus. But these people need to survive in order for Jesus to come through this line. So what does he say? I will not do it in your days, but I will rend it out of your hand to your son, because of David, not because of you. Howbeit, I will not rend away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe to thy son for David, my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, whom I have chosen. So God's plan is to maintain the line of Judah, the royal line of Judah, for the sake of Christ coming through it. That's it. If he had not done this, Israel probably would have been overthrown within a century or so, just like northern Israel was, and the line of David would not have been kept. And it just so happened Jesus didn't come from Solomon's line, he came from Nathan's line. But because of the line of David being so important to Israel, all the cousins and stuff like that were protected. So that's how Nathan is able to be the one who produces David bodily through Mary. So he says, the Lord stirred up an adversary for Solomon, Hadad the Edomite, and he was the king's seed in Edom. So that's one. For it came to pass when David was in Edom that Joab the captain of the host had gone up to bury the slain after he had smitten every male in Edom. For 6 months, Job remained there in all Israel until he cut off every man in Edom. All the males, they're all dead. If you kill all the males, they have to marry in with you, or they're just dead. They have to marry in with you or someone else. The Edomites don't fare well. That Hadad fled, and a certain Edomite of his father's servants with him to go into Egypt. Hadad yet being a little child. So this guy escaped when they were killing all of them, even the little kids. And they rose out of Midian and came to Paran, and they took the men with them out of Paran, and they came to Egypt unto Pharaoh king of Egypt, and they gave him a house and appointed him victuals and gave him land. And Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him a wife, the sister of his own wife, the sister of Taphanes, the queen. So he's married to the queen of Egypt's sister. It's interesting that they call him Pharaoh and sometimes they call him the king of Egypt. But anyways, he's married to Pharaoh's sister. That's status he's got in Egypt. And the sister, now this is what's weird to me, because is this the same Pharaoh that Solomon's married to his daughter? It makes me wonder. Because if Solomon's married to this guy's daughter, because it seems like he is, and here's why. It doesn't say the name of the Pharaoh that Solomon's married in with. But he brings up, now it says, when Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his fathers, so it seems to be the same Pharaoh. So this guy is essentially married to the aunt of Solomon's wife. That's how close they are. And Job the captain was the host of, Job the captain of the host was dead, so this would be after Job got killed, shortly after Solomon took the throne. Hadad said to Pharaoh, let me depart, that I might go to mine own country. Then Pharaoh said unto him, but to what hast thou lacked with me? Behold, thou seekest to go into thou seekest to go into thy own country. And he answered, nothing, howbeit let me go anyway. And God stirred up another adversary. So this is going to happen slowly. Remember, Solomon's going to rule for 40 years, but right at the beginning, this guy who's of royal blood in Edom gets free. Now remember, it's prophesied over Edom that Jacob would rule over him, which is happening right now, but that Edom one day would break the yoke off his back. Okay? This is the guy who is rebuilding now the royal line of Edom. So you're going to have, when you read in Genesis, that is going to be the line of Edom, Genesis 36, down through when they enter into the Promised Land. And God tells them, don't attack these guys in the Promised Land because I've gave them such and such. But Edom keeps giving them crap. They keep joining with their enemies, and that's why they just hate Israel, and that's why David basically puts them all to the sword. I don't remember exactly what the offense is, but they did keep attacking Israel. So David takes them all out. So now they're totally ruling over them in David's day because he's wiped out all the men. It's just women. So which means the Jews are either marrying these people or they're marrying other foreigners or whatever, but the point is there's no royal line. There's no aristocracy to lead these people. And now this guy is back, and he's of the royal line, and so it's going to take some time, but he's going to reconsolidate Edom eventually, and they're going to break away from Israel eventually. So then he says, and God stirred up another adversary, Rezin, the son of Eladiah, who fled from his lord Hadazazar, king of Zobah. So if you remember when David takes all the way up to the Euphrates here, see, this is Aleppo that got bombed really bad about 10 years ago. This is Hamath, this is Katna. These used to be Amorite kingdoms. So these people in them are probably a mixture of Arameans and Ammonites. That's probably what you got going on here. But this Hamath here and this Zobah I think is the region here. Apparently it's called Zedad today. This Zobah is going to, eventually these guys are going to rise up and they're going to be kings in Damascus. And when you hear about northern Israel and Damascus fighting pretty hard, it's going to be about a century before they really start giving them guff. But this is the beginnings of it. These are the adversaries to David's kingdom. Okay, so it's not like they're going to rise up and attack him in David's day. But the seeds of that are there because of Israel's sin. Okay, so God's raising up these people, and so Damascus is going to be a thorn on their side, and Edom's going to be a thorn on their side, and they're going to join themselves to their enemies, and also ally with and against northern Israel and southern Israel when they divide, and they're just going to be a pain in the butt forever. So, you're going to hear the king's name's Hadad. Remember, you've got two Hadads here. But you're going to hear, apparently these guys, it might be these Edomites and these guys are married in with each other, because these kings keep having names like Hadazazar, Hadad, and Rezin. That's what their names keep being again and again and again, down through, they basically get taken into captivity to Assyria eventually. But he says, and he gathered men from him, and he became a captain over a band which David slew of Zobah. In other words, when David took Zobah, the leftover men that were probably little kids at the time, remember David's going to rule for 40 years, and it's probably going to be like within 20 years or so that he takes Zobah. Then those kids are going to grow up, and this guy, but they're fatherless. So what he's going to do is going to gather those kids who are fatherless, and they're going to become a band. And they went to Damascus and dwelt there, and then they reigned in Damascus. So basically he grows up a gang, and that gang is essentially going to take over and make him king of Damascus. And he was an adversary in Israel all the days of Solomon, besides the mischief that Hadad did, and he abhorred Israel and reigned over Syria. So you now have new royal lines. There's some relation to the people in the past, because Hadad and Zobah, these lands that he had taken out, this Hamath here, these were Arameans, but they basically rise up to become kings in Damascus. You didn't really have... Damascus was a settled city for a long time, but these guys essentially take it over now. And then the Edomites are now back. So he says, and then he said, and Jeroboam the son of Nebat, an Ephrathite of Zeradah, Solomon's servant. So he's an Ephrathite. Now you're going to have two different versions of. Some say Ephrathite and some say Ephraimite. This is Ephraimite. The word that it uses here can be translated, I think it's like Ephrathi. Ephrathi can mean Ephraimite or Ephrathite, and that is confusing because an Ephrathite is actually one of the houses of Judah. Ephraim is the house of Joseph. So it is confusing when you see these things, but it looks like Jeroboam is actually an Ephraimite. And he says his mother's name was Zurah, a widow woman, and even he lifted up his hand against the king. And it was for this cause that he lifted up the hand against the king. So here's why he's going to start going against the king. Solomon built Milo and repaired the breaches of the city of David, his father. So Milo is another name for Shechem. And I'm not certain, but Milo is the city that he builds up and he gives to Pharaoh's daughter. So he's saying Solomon built up a city for Pharaoh's daughter, and this guy was in charge of it, and repaired the breaches in the city of David, his father. So remember, they sacked it. And so this is they sacked Jerusalem, and apparently there were still holes in the wall from when they sacked it. And so he says, and the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing that the young man was industrious, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. So apparently he was a leader, but there's no wars. So he's like, well, you're going to be a foreman. You're going to be over all these guys who are doing these building projects. And it came to pass at the time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment, and they were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it into 12 pieces. Remember, Israel's a new kingdom established in the hands of David and Solomon. And he said to Jeroboam, take the 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and I will give 10 tribes to thee. So you want to pay attention to this when you're reading through the parts about northern Israel. There are a few kings that God picks and God anoints, and the rest are usurpers and they just take over themselves. So when you hear the term tyrant, a tyrant is somebody who takes over in a coup and just reigns by force. A king is somebody who gets it by hereditary right or by divine anointing. Those are the only right ways you can become a king. Okay? Either it's passed down from you hereditarily, or you're anointed by God, or both. You can have, the people say, yep, you're the rightful heir, and also God's anointing's on you. Okay? So when you get into things about the divine rights of kings and all that stuff, you want to understand they still believe that when you get to the Reformation era and kings first start getting overthrown, but those kings think that the popes are like prophets anointing them, and they believe that. So they are people who, were obviously tribal rulers and stuff like that to begin with, but they believe their authority is anointed by God because the Pope blessed them or whatever. So he says, but he will have one tribe for David my servant's sake. He's always saying this, for David my servant's sake. He's letting you know, not because Solomon had some good days, it's because of David. And for Jerusalem's sake, the city where I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Now I want you to hear this. Solomon's wages are 666. 666, okay? I want you to understand Solomon. His wages are 666. He's married in with all the tribes. He's one of few people who are both kind of a type of Christ and a type of Antichrist. See, our Christ is married to a bride of every tribe, nation, and tongue. But the Antichrist is going to do something similar with the mark of the beast to unify him with all the nations. So which one is Solomon more like? Well, his wages are 666, and God appeared to him twice, and yet he went after other gods. That's important, because it's after the second appearance of Christ that they worship the image of the beast. The Jews who are following the Antichrist, remember, they've seen Christ come and rapture the church. They're going to see it and yet worship the mark of the beast. That's why he's not a big fan of Solomon here. He's like, for David's sake, not your sake, Solomon, because I showed up to you twice and you still blew it and you went after other gods, okay? And what are those gods called? They're called abominations. So you want to see the typology here because it's very loud. Because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in my eyes and to keep my statutes and my judgment as David his father. Howbeit I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him a prince all the days of his life for David my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will even take the kingdom out of his son's hand and give it unto thee, even 10 tribes. And unto his son I will give one tribe, that David my servant may have a light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen to put my name there. You see what God's intention is in this? It's not because Solomon had some good days, and I like him. It's because of what David did and why he chose to put his name there, because of David, and that's why he appeared to Solomon in the temple. And I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all thy soul desires, and you will be king over Israel. How do you like that? And it shall be, if you will hearken, listen, he's going to give him the same deal he gives to Solomon, the same deal he gave to Saul. If you hearken unto all that I command thee, and you will walk in my ways, and do what is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments as David my servant did, that I will be glad with thee, and I will build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and I will give Israel to thee. Do you see what he said to Jeroboam? It wasn't destined for this guy to fail. If you do what David did, you'll have Israel forever. You'll have a sure line like the line of David. That's what he says. He means what he says. Doesn't mean he doesn't know he's going to fail, but he still means what he says. But it's a bilateral covenant. And I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever. So in other words, he's going to afflict David for what Solomon did, but not forever. Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam, and Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt unto Shishak, king of Egypt, and was in Egypt until the death of Solomon. So I would assume this Shishak, remember it says the sister of Taphanes or whatever, seems to be the next pharaoh. And it says, the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the acts of Solomon? So this is another book that we no longer have. There's probably aspects of that in the book of Chronicles. And they pulled some stuff out of that, but we don't know where that book is. And the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. So you're going to have Jews pop up with so-called knowledge and wisdom of Solomon about casting out demons and all kinds of occult stuff later on. So this is why you want to know the book of the Acts of Solomon is gone. If somebody claims they have it, it's probably another Jewish forgery. There's tons of these things. Don't fall for them. And Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his stead. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, and all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. I don't know why they're coming to Shechem to make him king. Maybe it's like a decent meeting place, because you have Bethel here, that's southern Ephraim, and then you have Jerusalem here, and Shechem's way up here. Shechem's almost like Manasseh's territory. And not only that, it's a city that's known for having Canaanites in it. Remember, this is the same city where Judah's sons killed the people. But it's a meeting place, and this Mount Ebal seems to be significant to them. I don't know why. And it says, oh, that's where the blessings and cursings are. That's where Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim. That's why Shechem's important. It's significant because Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, the two mountains that they had to get on and say the blessings and cursings, are on either side of it. So it probably, that's really interesting, because the blessings go south and the cursings go north. That's not good. And it came to pass when Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, he was fled from the presence of the king. King Solomon and Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt. We know this. This is how you can tell they're pulling this together from different records. It just said that. But they're taking different records from different kings' acts. So you would assume that the book of the Acts of Solomon is where they're pulling it from, and then Ahijah the prophet. And when you get into Chronicles, it's going to say Ahijah and Iddo the prophet and Nathan are all writing on the life of Solomon, and then the book of the Acts of Solomon. So you have 4 different books that they're pulling from to come up with Kings and Chronicles. So he says that they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, Thy father made our yoke grievous, but therefore make thou the grievous service of thy father that was having his yoke put on us lighter, and we will serve thee. In other words, lighten up our taxation. And this is weird. And I'm going to tell you why. It says in the days of Solomon that he didn't make any Jews do any Israelites do any forced labor. It was only the Canaanites. Remember, he has 156,000 or 153,000 Canaanites in the land. They all have foremen. So, and Jeroboam would have been over that workforce. So it sounds like what Jeroboam has there is an army. Remember, he's a man of valor. He's a military guy. And he has this large workforce that is made up of Canaanites, or foreigners to the land that are still in land, 153,000 of them in the days of Solomon. These are who are doing all Solomon's building projects. These are who are doing the temple and all this stuff, like the quarrying and all that stuff. So these are guys who are fit, they're in shape. And Israel is probably being taxed, but they're not doing the physical labor. And I wouldn't even know if they're being taxed, because it seems like Solomon is super rich. But maybe they are being taxed. So maybe he's talking about lightening that up. Or he might just be talking about the workforce, the foreign workforce, who he's going to turn into basically his army. Because he's a military guy to start with. And he gets converted into a foreman. But guess what? He knows how to train up soldiers. And he's already got a military structure underneath him. And that sounds like what happened. So he said to them, Depart yet for 3 days, and come again to me. And the people departed. And King Rehoboam consulted with the old men that stood before Solomon his father while he yet lived, and said, How do you advise that I answer this people? And they spoke to him, saying, If you will be servant unto the people this day, and will serve them and answer them, speak good words to them, and they will be your servants forever. But he forsook the counsel of the old men which he had given him, and consulted with the young men that were grown up with him, which stood before him. And he said, What counsel give you that I should answer the people who have spoken to me, saying, Make the yoke which thy father did upon us lighter? And the young men that were grown up with him, this is his entourage, these are his boys, said, You should say to these people that spoke to you, saying, Thy father made our yoke heavy, but make it lighter unto us, you should say to them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins. And when he's saying loins, I don't think he's meaning thigh. And he says, now whereas your father did lade you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. And where my father chastised you with whips, I will chastise you with scorpions. So again, this isn't just the Israeli citizens that he's saying this to. I think this is the foreign workforce. So Jeroboam and all the people that came to Rehoboam on the third day as the king appointed, saying, come to me again on the third day. And the king answered the people roughly and forsook the old men's counsel that they gave him. Again, I would assume it's taxation on the regular people plus this workforce, and he's basically got an army ready to go. And he spoke to them after the council of young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, and I will add to your yoke. My father also chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Wherefore the king hearkened not to the people, for the cause was from the Lord, that he might perform his saying, which the Lord spake to Ahijah the Shilonite unto Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So I would assume that the Lord is hardening his heart, just like he's hardening Pharaoh's heart here. And then he says, when Israel saw that the king hearkened not to them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion have we in David? Nor have we any inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, see to your own house, David. So Israel departed to their tents. Remember, you have this stuff going on before that. You have the Benjamite do that after David tries to get his kingdom back from Absalom. Okay, it's the exact same thing going on. The difference is they hunted that guy down and killed him. And then he says, but for the children of Israel which dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So he reigns over Judah and over Benjamin. And so he's going to have up to about, not Ai, they're going to have down to Bethel, and he's going to have all this over here. So he's probably going to have Jericho, and he's going to, I don't know if he's going to have Jericho for certain, but Geba, these right here, Gibeah, Geba, this area down here, down in the Jordan, this is going to be Benjamite territory. And then when you get up to Ai and Bethel, I think Bethel's the southernmost main city of theirs. So if you see this main road going from Israel to Judah right here, that's kind of going to become the boundary between them. And they're going to go north and south, and they're basically divided. Then he said, then King Rehoboam sent to Adoram, who was over the tribute, and all Israel stoned him with stones, so that he died. So Rehoboam made speed to get him up to his chariot and flee to Jerusalem. So so it was over taxation. He was saying, give me tribute, give me taxes. And they stoned him to death. And they said, no, you can have some rocks instead. And so Israel rebelled against the house of David, and to this day. So Jeroboam basically led the charge. Remember, Jeroboam's essentially got an army ready to go. I would assume that's not all he's got. He's the foreman over these guys because it is a workforce. But these guys can now build up cities in Israel in defense of Judah, because you have the guy who's already in control of the workforce, and people are like, yeah, we like this idea. And he is an Ephraimite, and that's the main other kingdom that's up in the mountains up here, so that would be the front line of defense against them. And again, this is a pattern you have in world history with empires. That kingdom that becomes their front line of defense ends up ruling everything that's pleasant among them, because he's taxing these people in the richness of their land and their safety here to upkeep the defense, and then they eventually become the strong one and they rule over the rest of them. So I would assume, now there's a dispute whether the house of Ahab is from Issachar or from Ephraim. I would assume they're all from Ephraim. One of the guys lives in Issachar, but I don't think he's from the tribe of Issachar. I think they're all from Ephraim. So anyways, it says, and it came to pass when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had come again, that they sent and called him to the congregation and made him king over all Israel, and there were none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. Then when Rehoboam was come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180 chosen men, so 180,000, which were warriors, to fight against the house of Israel, and to bring the kingdom again to Rehoboam his son. So he's going to put them down by force with 180,000 men. But the word of the God came to Shemaiah, the man of God, saying, speak to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and unto the house of Judah and Benjamin, and the remnant of the people, saying, thus saith the Lord, you shall not go up nor fight against your brethren, the children of Israel. Return every man to his house. For this thing is from me. They hearken therefore to the word of the Lord and return to depart according to the word of the Lord. So I want you to see this. The people of Judah in general are righteous enough that when a prophet gets up and says, these guys splitting from you is from the Lord, let it lie, they refuse to go fight for Rehoboam. So the general population of Judah is probably not as bad as you think. And what I would imagine is when you have Jeroboam over the workforce, he's not just building these cities. All these temples that Solomon is having built for his foreign wives, not just their temples, their estates and all that stuff, he knows about it. And I would assume people aren't happy with it. Even though Israel's sinful, don't get me wrong, I would assume in general these people are not happy with them building temples for foreign gods in general. Then Jeroboam built Shechem in Mount Ephraim and dwelt therein, and he went out from thence and built Penuel. Okay, so Shechem starts out being his capital. Eventually it's going to turn to Samaria under the days of Ahab's dad. But right now it's going to be Shechem, and then it says Penuel. Where's Penuel? So what it looks like is he's going to rule over Ephraim in the mountains there, and then he builds Peniel, because see, here's Gilead here, and this is going to be his capital on the other side of the river. And this is how he basically maintains the half-tribe of Manasseh. Remember, they're cousins to the Ephraimites, which is going to include the Gileadites as part of their main force. So he has two capitals. And that's smart, because the Gileadites are known for being fighters and warriors, and they've got their flank covered over here from the potential rivals from the east, Arameans and whatnot. And so he's got two capitals, and he's got a backup plan in case somebody's going to come at him. And so Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. So here's how this all starts, and I want you guys to see this. He doesn't have faith. God told him, all you have to do is follow my commandments, and I will establish you a sure line just like David does, but he doesn't have faith. And so he says, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. So he's already scared. Now, maybe he backed up to hear from Shechem, worrying about it. Maybe he doesn't know that, hey, the prophet told them to stand down, and they stood down, but he's scared. And he says, if this people goes up to do the sacrifice to the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again to their Lord, even unto Rehoboam king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah. So he's like, this going up to Jerusalem to worship is going to be the death of me. Isn't that awful? He's like, no, the God who's in that temple said, that's yours forever. Just obey me. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said to them, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, who brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. Behold thy God. So he is making the exact same golden calf. He makes 2 of them. But remember, when Aaron just made one of them, he called it thy gods. Okay? Because it's the 3-part. It's not because there's 2 of them that he's calling it thy gods. It's because it's a tripart trinity. It's a false trinity, basically. So he said, here's your gods, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So essentially, he's making an image of the golden calf that Aaron made. One for the north end of Israel, one for the south. So wherever you are, you can go somewhere and worship this God rather than Israel. And he says he set one in Bethel and the other one in Dan. Now, Dan, remember, already had a teraphim up there, an idol, that this guy Micah made. And then this grandson of Moses had this cult with them. But now he has the golden calf too. So now they have multiple gods up there in Dan that they're worshiping. So he's already had a cult there, and they're like, Dan, you're fine with like a false god being up here, right? That people can come worship. And they're like, yeah, sure, that's how we roll. In this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. Even unto Dan. Let's see. before the one at Bethel and before the other as far as Dan, okay? So in other words, wherever you were within the kingdom, you could go somewhere and not have to go to Jerusalem to worship. So he's basically starting a new state cult. Not cool. And he made a house of high places, and he made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. So who are these priests? We don't know. But one of these priests is eventually going to be the priest that makes the temple for the Samaritans, because the Assyrians going to get it back. But they're not from the sons of Levi, so there's nothing legitimate about this priesthood. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah, and he offered upon the altar. And he, so the 8th month on the 15th day. So let's think about that. If April is, Passover is the beginning, and that's in April. And you conspiracy theorists are going to love this. What's 8 months after April? And that is December. So if Passover is in middle April, he just set up Christmas. This is literally around Christmas time. And he's saying it's like to the feast that's in Judah. Well, what does Judah have? Well, they have the Feast of Tabernacles and they have the Feast of Atonement. But they didn't have a feast around Christmas time. Theirs is in the 7th month and the 10th month, I believe. Let me think about that. Because it might be 10 from their official New Year, not from Passover. 15th day of the 7th month is when they do the Feast of Tabernacles. So essentially, it's a month after the Feast of Tabernacles. He's got his different one set up. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart, and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel, and offered upon the altar burnt incense. So I just made up my own priests. I just made up my own feast, my own holy day. I just overthrew everything. Could that be foretyping the church overthrowing Polycarp's Passover on the Passover and celebrating the resurrection on the Passover weekend to the formula that the Roman Catholics come up with? Could be. Could it be coming up with Christmas? Could be. We don't know. Could it be foretyping that, though? But the point is, that's what they do. They split with the true worship, and they create a new priesthood that God did not ordain, and then they start changing the holy days. That sounds very much like what the Catholic Church did. And behold, there came a man of God out of Judah by the word of the Lord unto Bethel. No, it doesn't say who it is. And Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. So as soon as he does this guy comes. And he cries unto the altar of the Lord and said, O altar, altar, thus saith the Lord, behold, a child shall be born into the house of David, Josiah by name. This is amazing. Josiah is not going to be for it's like a 300-400 years. It's a while. And he says, and upon thee he shall offer the priests of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones will be burnt upon thee. And by the time Josiah does this, Israel is no more. And he gave a sign that day, and he said, this is the sign which the Lord has spoken. Behold, the altar shall be rent, and the ashes that are upon it shall be poured out. And it came to pass, when King Jeroboam heard the saying of the man of God, which cried against the altar in Bethel, that he had put forth his hand from the altar, saying, lay hold of him, and his hand which he put forth against him dried up, so that he could not pull it out from him again. So his hand froze, and he couldn't pull it back, like his arm was stuck. And the altar was rent, and the ashes poured out from the altar, according to the sign which the man of God had given by the word of the Lord. And the king answered and said unto the man of God, entreat now the face of the Lord thy God, and pray for me, that my hand may be restored again. And the man of God besought the Lord, and the king's hand was restored the same as it was before. So God is like hardcore warning, but I'm going to let you off with a warning this time. Nope. Does he learn from that? Nope. And the king said unto the man of God, come home with me and refresh thyself, and I will give thee a reward for making my hand better again. And the man of God said to the king, if thou wilt give me thine house, I will not go with me. Neither will I eat bread or drink water in this place. I ain't going to be around when lightning strikes. For it was so charged me by the word of the Lord, eat no bread or drink no water, nor turn again the same way as thou camest. And he went by another way and returned not the way that he came to Bethel. So it's in Bethel that he's doing this. Remember, he's in Shechem, but he just set up an altar in Bethel. That's the southernmost border, southernmost town in this kingdom, and Dan is the northernmost town. So he set up an altar in Bethel, and this guy came up to Bethel, but he returns by another way. Now, he just did a crazy sign right in front of everybody. So it's obvious this word of the Lord is true, but there's this other guy. There dwelt an old prophet in Bethel, just another prophet. And his sons came and told him all the works that the man of God did in Bethel, and the words which he had spoken to the king, them they told also to their father. And their father said unto him, Which way went he? Which way did he go? And for his sons had seen what way the man of God went, which came from Judah. And he said to his sons, Saddle me an ass. And they saddled him an ass, and he rode thereon. And went after the man of God, and found him sitting under an oak. And he said to him, Art thou the man of God that camest from Judah? And he said, I am. Then he said unto him, Come home with me and eat bread. And he said, I may not return with thee, nor go with thee, neither will I eat bread nor drink water with thee in this place. For it was said to me by the word of the Lord, Thou shalt eat no bread, nor drink no water, nor turn again by the way that thou camest. But then he said, I am a prophet also as thou art, and an angel spoke to me by the word of the Lord, saying, Bring him back with thee into thine house, that he may eat bread and drink water. But he lied to him. This is why whenever anybody comes to me and says, I've got a word of the Lord for you, and it's direction for my life, and it's not confirming anything that the Lord's telling me, I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to call BS. Because it's not that you can't hear things from other people like prophecies. It's just that you have the Holy Spirit in you too. And if you have no inclination whatsoever other than them saying this thing, you're in a bad way. Notice he gets this thing he said from an angel, but he just flat out lied. But the man of God said, nope. So God said no, and he said, but I'm a prophet, and an angel told me. So he's like, oh, okay, well, that's a horse of a different color. Let's go eat. And he went back with him, and he ate bread in his house and drank water. And it came to pass, as they sat on the table, that the word of the Lord came to the prophet that brought him back. And he cried to the man of God that came from Judah, saying, Thus saith the Lord, for as much as you have disobeyed the mouth of the Lord, and have not kept the commandment which the Lord thy God commanded thee. Now I want you to hear this, because this is all really about Jeroboam. It's not about this prophet. But God kills this prophet as a sign about how serious it is about keeping his commandments. But camest back and has eaten bread and drunk water in the place to which the Lord said to me, Eat no bread and drink no water. Thy carcass shall not come to the sepulchre of your fathers. So it's not just the sign the prophet performed. His own death is a type of what they're doing. I told you to go to Jerusalem and offer sacrifices. You're offering it in Bethel. Don't do that anymore. So he goes back, and he fails, because he told him, go back and don't even eat bread in this place. And he dies. And it came to pass, after he had eaten bread, and after he had drunk, that he saddled him on the ass, to wit, for the prophets had brought him back. And when he was gone, a lion met him by the way, and slew him. And his carcass was cast in the way, so in the road. And the ass stood by it, and the donkey also stood by the carcass. So his lion's just killed him, and then it's just standing there next to the donkey. The donkey's fine. The donkey ain't running away. They're just like symbolic, y'all. Symbolic. You want to get a picture of this for your Facebook, because we're just gonna stand here, just let you know this is how it happens. And behold, men passed by and saw the carcass in the way, and the lion standing by the carcass. And they came and told it in the city where the old prophet dwelt. The lion's just sitting there, man. And when the prophet that brought him back from the way heard thereof, he said, It is the man of God who was disobedient to the word of the Lord. Therefore the Lord delivered him unto the lion, who has torn him and slayed him according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke to him. It's not easy to be a prophet, y'all. First of all, it's not easy to be a prophet. If you're going to school to learn how to be a prophet, you're better off like just throwing yourself in a death camp. Because a real prophet, you're going to go through some crap. The other thing is just because you're a prophet doesn't mean you're not going to screw up. Doesn't mean you're sinless. Doesn't mean the Holy Spirit is covering you for making really stupid mistakes. This guy makes a really stupid mistake, and that stupid mistake is assigned to the other prophet that was the word of the Lord. So he spake to his son, saying, Saddle me an ass. And they saddled him, and he went and found his carcass in the way, and the ass and the lion standing by the carcass. And the lion had not eaten the carcass, nor torn the ass. And the prophet stood up the carcass of the man of God, and laid it on his ass, and brought it back. And the old prophet came to the city and mourned and buried him. So he's bringing this guy back, and the lion's just chilling there like, that's fine. I wasn't going to eat him. I just needed to kill him to fulfill the word of the Lord. And he laid his carcass in his own grave, and they mourned over him, saying, Alas, my brother. So he knew he was a true prophet. They're both true prophets, But one true prophet lies to the other true prophet to test whether he was a true prophet. And when he finds out he's a true prophet, he's dead. Does he feel bad? Probably a little. And it came to pass that he had buried him, and he spoke to his son, saying, When I am dead, then bury me in the sepulchre where the man of God is buried, and lay my bones beside thy bone. For the saying which he cried to the Lord against the altar of Bethel and against the houses of the high places which are against the cities of Samaria shall surely come to pass. After this thing, Jeroboam returned not from his evil way, but made again the lowest of people priests of the high places. Whoever would, he consecrated him, and he became one of the priests of the high places. And this thing became sin to the house of Jeroboam, even to cut it off and destroy it from the face of the earth. So that's why Jeroboam's got to go. At that time, Abijah the son of Jeroboam fell sick, and Jeroboam said to his wife, Arise, I pray thee, and disguise thyself, that thou not be known to the wife of Jeroboam, and get thee to Shiloh. And behold, Ahijah the prophet, who told me that I would be king over the people. Now you remember Shiloh is right here, is where the original place where the tabernacle was. I don't know if it's still there. I doubt it, but that's where it was. He says, And take with thee 10 loaves and cracknels and a cruse of honey. I'd assume crackers or something, whatever. And go to him and tell thee what shall become of the child. And Jeroboam's wife did, and she arose and went to Shiloh and came to the house of Ahijah. But Ahijah could not see, for his eyes were set by reason of age. So some time has passed. How old is Ahijah now? I don't know. He says, The Lord said to Ahijah, Behold, the wife of Jeroboam comes and asks a thing for thee for thy son, for he is sick. Thus and thus shalt thou say to her, for it shall be when she cometh in that she will feign herself to be another woman. So he's a prophet, and he already knows she's going to pull some crap. And it was said that Ahijah heard the sound of her feet as she came in the door, and he said, Come in, thou wife of Jeroboam, why feignest thou self to be another woman? For I am sent to thee with heavy tidings. So like, you thought you came to me? No, I came to you. Go tell Jeroboam, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, For as much as I exalted thee from among the people, and made thee prince over my people Israel, and rent the kingdom from the house of David, and gave it to thee, and yet thou hast not been as my servant David, who kept my commandments, who followed me with all his heart, to do only what was right in my eyes, but has done evil above all that were done before me, for thou hast gone and made thee other gods and molten images, to provoke me to anger, and cast me behind your back. Therefore, behold, I will bring evil upon the house of Jeroboam, and I will cut off from Jeroboam him that pisseth against the wall, in other words, all the males, and him that is shut up and left in Israel, and will take away the remnant from the house of Jeroboam, as a man takes away dung till it's going to be gone. In other words, all the male possible descendants to your throne are all going to get killed. That's what he's saying. And him that dies in the land of Jeroboam, the city, the dogs shall eat, and him that dies in the field shall the fowls of the air eat, and the Lord hath spoken it. Arise thou therefore, and get thee into thine own house, and when thy feet enter into the city, the child will die. And all Israel will mourn for him and bury him, for he only of Jeroboam will come to the grave, because in him there is found some good thing towards the Lord God of Israel in the house of Jeroboam. So for whatever reason, God loves Jeroboam's child. Now, could this be like an age of accountability thing, and Jesus loves little children? Possibly. He's a kid, and he's going to die, and he's basically saying, this is the only thing I like about your house. Everything else is toast. Moreover, the Lord shall raise him a king over Israel, who shall cut off the house of Jeroboam that day. But what? Even now. What does that mean? Let's look at that. Even right now. So in other words, God's saying, I'm going to do this lickety-split. For the Lord shall smite Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and he shall root up Israel out of this good land, which he gave to their fathers, and shall scatter them beyond the river, because they have made their groves, provoking the Lord to anger. Now this term, beyond the river, people are going to try to make you think it always means the river, the Euphrates. It doesn't. It can. It just means beyond the river. So it's probably, in this case, beyond the river Euphrates, because the cities that Israel is scattered into, they are in Mesopotamia. But it doesn't always mean that. So don't assume when you see beyond the river, it's always meaning beyond the Euphrates. He says, and he shall give up Israel because of the sins of Jeroboam, who did sin and who made Israel to sin. And Jeroboam's wife arose and departed and came to Tirzah, and when she came to the threshold of the door, the child died. So in Jeroboam's life, the first king, He's already prophesied the dispersal of Israel for Jeroboam's sin, and then Josiah, after their dispersal, how he's going to dig up and burn the bones of the false priests that were over this false worship here. So in the very first king they have, their doom is spelled. It is going to happen. It's an absolute certainty. This is how So is God saying, because they're never going to repent of this thing, this is why they're going to be toast? Probably. He knows they're going to keep doing this. But it's Jeroboam who got him started doing it in the first place. Why is every king after him going to keep up this cult? Because they see as the alternative is them going up to Jerusalem, and that's dangerous for national unity. They follow the same error of Jeroboam not trusting God. But Jeroboam's the guy who started it, and so that's why his whole house is going to get wiped out. Not good. So they buried him, and all Israel mourned him according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by the hand of his servant the prophet. When Jeroboam's wife arose and came to Tirzah, and when she came to the threshing hole, the child died, and they buried him and mourned him. And the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he warred and how he reigned, behold, they are written in the books of the chronicles of the kings of Israel. And the days which Jeroboam reigned were 22 years, and he slept with his father, and Nadab his son reigned in his place. So he's going to have a 22-year reign. He rebels against him. He has a kid. The kid dies, and then he has another son reign in his place. How old is the son at the time? I don't know. He has a young child die, and that might be like a last-born son, and his other son who's going to reign in his place is probably already wicked like him. So it's probably the young kid who's still the innocent one that God takes and says, he's still a little kid. He's not as wicked as you guys are, therefore I love him. But you guys are hardened in your wickedness. So Rehoboam the son of Solomon reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem. So spitball, these guys are both going to reign about the same time, because it's going to be after Rehoboam takes the throne that Jeroboam is going to rebel, but it's going to be, I think, within a year or so. And so basically it's about 4 years later that Jeroboam's going to die. So their reigns are roughly parallel. And the city which the Lord did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there, and his mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess. So he is half Ammonite from Solomon. And Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord, and provoked him to jealousy with the sins which they had committed above all which their fathers has done. For they also built them high places and images and groves on every hill and under every green tree. So they're also doing the same incense offering in the sacred places of the Canaanites. Not cool. And there were also sodomites in the land, so they're going with the buggering right away, according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. So they're doing, you need to understand these mystery religion, these things that take place in these secret groves, these secret meetings, are usually orgy-like stuff. It's usually they're going and they're worshiping some god and they're celebrating something that has to do with orgies. Why? Probably because it all starts with Ashtoreth, who was having sex to make Nephilim. That's probably why. I would assume most of your sex cults go back to that. And I think what it is it's this idea that this woman is so desirable that even an angel fell for her. I think you have that kind of story repeating itself again and again and again and again throughout historical mythology, because it is like the ultimate vanity of a woman, that not just could any man fall for your beauty, but even one of the gods could fall for you, that you're so hot. Okay, that's why you keep seeing this in Greek mythology and stuff like that with Zeus and these different gods, like, oh, that woman's so beautiful, I want her, and let's go to war over Helen of Troy and blah blah blah. It's like the woman who's so beautiful that even the gods can't resist. And I would assume it's that kind of thing that starts and it turns into just all kinds of gay orgies and stuff. But anyways, it says they built them in the high places. Let's see, there's Sodomites. And it came to pass in the 5th year of Rehoboam that Shishak, the king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem. Now remember, Shishak is the father-in-law of their adversary in Edom. So assume that the Edomites are involved with this too. And he says, and he took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and they took away them all, and took away all the shields of gold which Solomon made. So they fully looted all Solomon's gold. Remember how rich Solomon was. I mean, he's probably sitting on bajillions of dollars worth of gold, plus all the gold stuff. Remember, these gold shields were worth like $2.8 million a piece or something like that. They took them. They're like, we're just going to grab, a few $1 billion worth of gold from you and be out. And I would assume that the Edomites were part of this. But King Rehoboam made in their stead brazen shields and committed them to the hands of the chief guard, which kept the door of the king's house. So I don't know how this went on here, because they just make kind of light of it. He's king for 17 years, but they're able to sack Jerusalem. And they just take all the gold and leave. Not good for Rehoboam. Boy, really not good power play. How did that work out with how big your loins were and how bad your whips are going to be? Not great, Rehoboam. And it was so that the king went back to the house of the Lord, that a guard bare them and brought them back into the guard chamber. So basically, they made brass shields to replace the gold shields, which aren't worth 1% of the value. And then they took them and brought them back. So what did these Egyptians do? Did they just make a raid on the city? I don't know. They had to have come up with a decently sizable force. But just as he came up against Jerusalem, where were these 180,000 guys that he just had ready to go for Israel? I don't know, but it just seems like they suddenly just came in, made a raid. Maybe so Jerusalem's down here. Maybe they had their armies all up here because they're worried about northern Israel. And he was like, I'm just going to go get Jerusalem from behind. Which is ironic, because this is probably the brother of Solomon's wife. That's what's ironic about this. I don't. So it looks like this Shishak. Remember, he has a sister-in-law that he gives to this Edomite rival of Solomon, and then there's a possibility that he gave, because remember, Jeroboam had went and sheltered among him too. So this Edomite and Jeroboam both came out from under him. I might be getting them mixed up. But anyways, Shishak may have had a sister marry Jeroboam, but he knows Israel's weak because of Jeroboam and the 10 tribes breaking away. And so he comes up against Israel with a massive army, and it looks like Rehoboam just submits to him, and that's why they get all the plunder. He doesn't even try to fight this big army. So apparently they just knew, because they were very privy, because they're friends with Jeroboam, that they're weakened now, so we're going to go sack them. And then it said, now the rest of the acts of Rehoboam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of Kings of Judah? And there was war with Rehoboam and Jeroboam all their days. So they're at war, but they're not necessarily fighting. And that's probably what happened. What probably happened was Rehoboam was essentially standing there with his army, and they were standing there with their army. And he basically sends a message to Egypt to come from the rear and take him out. And he does, and he probably has Edomite allies with him. So he says, and Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and his mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess, and Abijam, his son, reigned in his stead. Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, reigned over Abijam over Judah. In the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, reigned. Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, reigned over Abijam. Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, son of Nebat, Abijam began to reign over Judah. And he reigned for 3 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. Okay, so this is Absalom, and apparently he has a daughter named Maacah. And I think he might have named her after his sister. I could be wrong. But anyways, this is the Absalom who tried to overthrow it. And apparently his daughter is the mother of this guy. So Absalom still has a daughter married into the royal line. And he committed all the sons that his father did before him, and his heart was not true to the Lord and his God like the heart of David. Nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, setting up his son after him and establishing Jerusalem. Because David did what was right in the sight of the Lord and did not turn aside from anything that he had commanded him all the days of his life, except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. Notice he's still saying, because of David, because of David, because of David. The war begun between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continued all the days of his life. And the rest of the acts of Abijam and all that he did, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Judah? And there was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. So they might be like raiding each other, but we're not hearing about all-out massive battles that they're having. Abijam slept with his ancestors, and they buried him in the city of David, and his son Asa succeeded him. It doesn't say how long he reigned for. Oh, okay, in the 20th year, so it's very short. So this is the 18th year, so apparently he reigns 2 years. In the 20th year of King Jeroboam of Israel, Asa began to reign over Judah, and he reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. So he says he reigned for 3 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Absalom. And he committed all the sins that his father did before him. His heart was not true to the Lord his God like the heart of his father David. Now remember, his father was the son of an Ammonite, and Solomon is building idolatrous temples for these other Ammonite women, which means their sons are probably going to be pagans. So Rehoboam doesn't say he's getting into any pagan stuff, but his son is now married to the daughter of Absalom, and he's part of the line of David, and he's also part Ammonite. And so he says, nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, setting up a son after him and establishing him in Jerusalem, because David did what was right in the son of... Okay. So then it says, Abijah slept with his ancestors, and they buried him in the city of David, and his son Asa succeeded him. So he only reigned for like 2 years. So I would assume... it doesn't really say how he died. So we're not going to see this until we get to the book of Chronicles, but he's basically going to beat Jeroboam in war, and that's going to lead to Israel having peace for about 10 years, but he's going to die. And it doesn't really say how he dies, but it's just saying that he's wicked. So then his son Asa succeeds him 2 years later, and it says in the 20th year of King Jeroboam, Asa began to reign. He reigned for 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Absalom. So it's obviously they don't have the same mom. This is not his son. This is his grandmother, but they're just calling her his mother. And she is going to have a cult. And it says, Asa did what was right in the sight of the Lord, as his father David has done. He put away the male temple prostitutes out of the land and removed the idols that his ancestors had made. So the King James is going to say sodomites. Remember, they're doing gay orgies in these temple groves and stuff like this. And then he removed the idols that his fathers had made. And also Maacah, his mother, he even removed her from being queen mother because she had made an idol in a grove, and Asa destroyed her idol and burned it at the brook Kidron. So Maacah, even though she's the daughter of Absalom, you got to remember, Absalom is descended from Gesher, which is an Aramaean tribe. So you have all these foreigners with their foreign gods, and this is what you got. But the high places were not removed. Nevertheless, Asa's heart was perfect with the Lord all his days, and he brought the things which his father had dedicated and the things which he himself had dedicated into the house of the Lord, silver and gold vessels. And there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. Now, Baasha is going to be the guy who overthrows Jeroboam. And Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built Ramah, that he might not suffer any to go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah. So Ramah is right here. Remember I told you how Bethel was their southernmost city? Well, he builds this fortified city of Ramah here, which is right on the apex of the road to Jericho. So that would have been one of your main roads going to the east. And then the road going down to Gibeon. So that's going down toward the Philistines. And basically what he's doing is he's making that nobody from the north can get to Israel, because he's got this big city blocking the way. So this is Baasha. This is the guy who overthrows Jeroboam. They haven't gotten into why yet. He said, Then Asa took all the silver and gold that were left in the treasures of the house of the Lord and the servants of the king's house, and delivered them in the hands of the servants. And King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabramon, the son of Hezion, the king of Syria, that dwelt in Damascus. Remember, this is going to be This is apparently gonna be a descendant of the guy who he raised up in the days of Solomon. So we're like right now we're about between 20 and 60 years after Solomon's dead. And he says, he said, "There's a league between me and thee, and between my father and thy father. Behold, I have sent to thee a present of silver and gold. Come and break thy league with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may depart from thee." So he essentially buys off his ally, his ally from Damascus. So Ben-Hadad hearkened unto King Asa, and they sent captains of the hosts which he had against the cities of Israel, and smote Ijon, Dan, Abel, Beth-Makkah, and all of Chinneroth with the lands of Naphtali. So essentially they invaded northern Israel. Now, this is going to start, remember, these guys were actually friends in the beginning because they all don't like Rehoboam and Solomon's house. But he just bought them off, and now they're going to invade northern Israel, and they're going to be at war pretty much nonstop because of this. They do become frenemies towards the end, right before they go into captivity, though. And he says, "And it came to pass when Baasha heard thereof that he left off building Ramah and dwelt in Tirzah." So he's going to move up north to Shechem because now that's going to be a fortified city that he can keep an eye on these guys because they've invaded the lowlands, essentially. So then King Asa made a proclamation throughout all Judah. None was exempted, and they took away the stones of Ramah and the timber thereof, wherewith Baasha had builded. And King Asa built with them Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. So you see Geba down here by Gibeah, and Mizpah up here. So basically he was going to build a fortified city right there, and instead he takes the stones down and he builds up fortified city, one blocking south of Bethel so they can't force people not to go down that way anymore, and then one up here on the road to Jericho so they can't force people from coming over from there. Because what he's trying to do is force people from northern Israel and the tribes of Israel across the Jordan to not be able to come into Jerusalem anymore. He's literally trying to block the way for them going up to the feast of Jerusalem. So then the rest of the acts of Asa, with all his might and all that he did in the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of his chronicles, the king of Judah? Nevertheless, in the time of his old age, he was diseased in his feet. And Asa slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his stead. So Asa seems to be pretty good. I think the one thing the Lord has against him in Chronicles is that he goes to secular doctors instead of going to the Lord when he's diseased. I could have him mixed up with somebody else, but I think that's the only thing the Lord counts against him. So he's getting rid of the idols and stuff. You have somewhat of a revival. And because God is not happy with Jeroboam, remember he says in Jeroboam, he's going to wipe out him and his house lickety-split. And on the other hand, Asa is getting rid of the idols in their land. God is going to favor him and allow for, God favors him, but he really just spent a bunch of money that would have been dedicated to the Lord on bribing an enemy to go invade northern Israel. So these guys are operating in the flesh. It's not like God's really doing much for them at this point. So Asa slept with his fathers in the city of David, his father, and Jehoshaphat, his son, reigned in his stead. So again, we're 60-ish years past Solomon's reign, okay, and this is what's gone down so far. And then Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the second year of Asa. The king of Judah reigned over Israel for 2 years. So remember, Asa's father reigns for 2 years. He goes down. Now Asa reigns for 2 years. So you're looking about 20, maybe 21 years after Solomon. Okay, this is how fast this is happening. Jeroboam dies. His son takes over. And in the second year of his son, it says, he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of his father, and in the sin wherewith he made Israel to sin, so the golden calves. And Baasha the son of Ahijah of the house of Issachar conspired against him, and Baasha smote him at Gibeathon, which belonged to the Philistines, for Nadab and all of Israel laid siege to Gibeathon. So essentially, I don't know how Judah and the Philistines are at this time. I think the Philistines are just weak, but he's just like, let's go take this Gibeathon, which is a far northern You see here's Joppa, which is where the Danites' port is. Gibeathon is pretty much a city of the Philistines that's far to the north of their territory. You see Gath and Ekron. These would be their cities. Lachish. These would be their cities down here. But if you remember, David takes this, and he's friendly with the king of Gash because that's who he was serving under while he was on the outs with Saul. And so David's going to take this territory here, but it looks like he incorporates these Philistines into his army, and he's cool with them. So this... So this Gibeathon here would be a northernmost city of their territory, and you probably have relative peace between the Jews and the Philistines at this time, but you got to remember they were just sacked by Egypt and paid a massive tribute to get out of that. It's not like they're subject to tribute to them on the regular. They just did it that one time. What seems to be going on in Egypt this time, and there seem to be multiple dynasties ruling in Egypt, so it's not like there's just one big powerful pharaoh over everything. So how are they? We don't know. They don't really have any wars with the Philistines, but I would assume the Philistines are somewhat friendly. They're kind of like a minority people group, and they have some freedom, but they probably don't like them that much. But they can't project power up here anymore. So this is a Philistine city, but it's essentially in Judah's territory. And remember that Jeroboam is there at war, and this would be a nice fortified city because you see all the roads coming and going through there. It would essentially, if you have Gibeathon, you would have the road from Joppa up to Gibeon, and that's another. What they're trying to do is they're trying to hem in Judah so that they can control all the roads that would go into Judah from outwards or from Israel. And so you see Joppa's right there, their port, and if they control Gibeathon, then these guys have to go from Lod and up here to see where Ramah is, where he was building that city. That's the same. It's just north of the main road right here. But what it would make sure is that you couldn't go around them and still keep trading with northern Israel. So it says, even in the third year of Asa, king of Judah, did Baasha slay him and reign in his stead. So remember, Asa's just 5 years after Rehoboam because his dad only does 2 years, and Baasha kills Jeroboam. Jeroboam is going to be 5 years. He's going to outreign Rehoboam by 5 years. It's 17 and 22. So it's essentially Jeroboam is going to die, and this Baasha is going to take over almost immediately when Jeroboam dies. His son is going to rule, Nadab, and he's in there for 2 years, and this guy kills him right off the bat. Okay, so it says, and it came to pass when he reigned that he smote all the house of Jeroboam, and he did not left to Jeroboam any that breathed until he destroyed him, according to the saying of the Lord, which he spoke by the servant Ahijah the Shilonite. So God told him he was going to destroy his house. He didn't anoint another king in his place, though. Okay, so this is important. God basically said Israel is doomed. He doesn't anoint a king in his place, but he is going to raise up somebody to destroy Jeroboam. The next king is going to come in democratically. So he says, because of the sins of Jeroboam which he sinned, in which he made Israel sin by his provocation wherewith he provoked Lord God of Israel to anger. Now the rest of the acts of Nadab, all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And there was war between Asa and Baasha, the king of Israel, all their days. So here's another book that they're going to have. So this Edu the prophet was one. Remember, that was covering some of that stuff. The book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel, we don't have that either. These would have been probably like king's annals and stuff. And I would imagine their priesthood was keeping track of this. That's where this comes from. But the prophets are probably drawing on it. That would be my assumption. They probably have royal records, and some of this gets pulled in the priesthood about, they're keeping their history like Israel's keeping their history. So he says, there was war between Asa and Baasha and Israel all their days. And in the third year of Asa, king of Judah, began Baasha, the son of Ahijah, to reign over all Israel in Tirzah 24 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the way of Jeroboam and in his sin wherewith he made Israel to sin. So Baasha's going to take over and reign for 24 years. He's just going to do the exact same thing. Then the word of the Lord came to Jehu, the son of Hanani, against Baasha, saying, For as much as I exalted thee out of the dust, and made thee prince over my people Israel, and thou hast walked in the way of Jeroboam, and has made the people of Israel to sin, to provoke me to anger with their sin, behold, I will take away the posterity of Baasha and the posterity of his house, and I will make thy house like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So the Lord is saying that he exalted him, but we don't have any record of a prophet anointing him. So maybe a prophet did, maybe not. Him that dies of Baasha in the city will the dogs eat, and him that dies in the field will the fowls of the air. So he's like, you're going to act like Jeroboam, you're going to go out like Jeroboam. Now the rest of the acts of Baasha, what he did and his might, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So northern Israel, we're like 50 years past this. So we're still in the reign of, I think, Abijah, the father of Jehoshaphat. And Baasha slept with his fathers and was buried in Tirzah, and Elah his son reigned in his stead. And also by the hand of the prophet Jehu, the son of Hanani, came the word of the Lord against Baasha and against his house, even for all that he did in the sight of the Lord, and provoking him to anger with the works of his hands, and being like the house of Jeroboam, and because he killed him. So God is, I want you to understand, God raises him up to kill Jeroboam, but he's still not happy that he killed him. It doesn't look like God anointed him to do that. He overthrew him and reigned as a tyrant, and God allowed it, but he was wicked. And it was just to punish Jeroboam. It wasn't because God liked him. So in the 26th year of Asa, of Judah, began Elah the son of Baasha to reign in Israel, and he reigned in Israel 2 years. And his servant Zimri, captain of half of his chariots, conspired against him, as he was in Tirzah, drinking himself drunk in the house of Arza, steward of his house in Tirzah. And Zimri went in and smote him and killed him in the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned in his stead. So he acts exactly like Jeroboam after overthrowing Jeroboam, which God allowed him to do that. He wanted Jeroboam to go. But he went out exactly like Jeroboam because he behaved exactly like Jeroboam. And it came to pass when he began to reign, as soon as he sat in his throne, that he slew all the house of Baasha, and he left not one that pisseth against the wall, neither his kinfolk nor his friends. Thus did Zimri destroy all the house of Baasha, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke against Baasha by Jehu the prophet. For all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah his son, by which they sinned, and by which they made Israel to sin, in provoking the Lord to anger with their vanities. Now the rest of the acts of Elah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? In the 27th year of Asa, king of Judah, Zimri reigned for 7 days. He had a solid week-long reign. And the people were encamped against Gibeathon, which belonged to the Philistines. So apparently they've been trying to get the city for quite some time. And that would be my guess, is their goal is to get this from the weakened Philistines and control the road to Joppa. They probably still have aspirations of getting this Ramah, but Gibeon, I would assume, is with the northern Israel territories, not with Judah. Gibeah, down here, is part of Benjamin. It's like, so this side of this main road is Benjamin, and the rest of this over here, all the way up to Joppa, is northern Israel, and this is pretty much Judah/Philistine territory. So they're trying to get this. They've been trying to get this city for 25 years, it looks like. And the people who were encamped heard say, Zimri has conspired and has also slain the king, whereof all Israel made Omri, the captain of the host, king over Israel in that day. So Omri was essentially his Joab, if you will. And the people just voted, how about you be our king? And Omri went up from Gibeathon, and all Israel with him, and they besieged Tirzah. So where's this Tirzah? So this is this city he had in northern Israel. Remember up in here that the Arameans have invaded this. And it didn't say that they left. They might have invaded it and took it, or periodically pillaged it, or dominating it. Because if he's reigning up here, and they're going after that city down there, they might not have total control of these lowlands right here in Naphtali, because that's where the other people have invaded. So it says, it came to pass when Zimri saw that the city was taken, that he went into the palace of the king's house and burnt the king's house over him with fire, and he died. So he just suicided himself. And for his sins which he sinned in doing evil in the sight of the Lord, and walking in the way of Jeroboam, and the sin which he did to make Israel to sin. Now the rest of the acts of Zimri and the treason that he wrought, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So they felt the need to account this king who ruled for a week. And basically they're saying he walked in the ways of Jeroboam. So apparently he was just another guy. And I would assume he's, a in the military or something, or another royal family. He's from the family of Issachar, and he's like, let's just kill this guy and I'll be king. And people were just like, no, let's get that guy. So the official chronicles still counts him as reigning for a week, and he takes over this guy's capital city here. And now the rest of the acts of Zimri and the treason that he wrought, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Then were the people of Israel divided into two parts. Half followed Tibni, the son of Ginath, to make him king, and half followed Omri. So the people who had been besieging, this is the former army of the guy this other guy just killed, this Baasha guy, just said, let's follow the captain of the army and make him king. And then these other people are like, no, what about Tibni, the son of Ginath? I don't know who Tibni, the son of Ginath, is. This could be more of a house, because the strongest houses here is Issachar and Ephraim. And maybe one's from Issachar and one's from Ephraim. They don't really get into those details. Omri could have been from Issachar, but I think he's from Ephraim too. He said, but the people who followed Omri prevailed against the people that followed Tibni, the son of Ginath, and Tibni died, and Omri reigned in the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah. So they apparently have a divided northern Israel and a civil war going on for about 5 years before Omri has the kingdom securely. So it's interesting because remember how you have Baasha's having war with Abijah, but then it says they had peace for 10 years. Well, Baasha's going to reign for like 20 some years. This is probably why they have peace. These guys have 5 years of civil war going on. And they're just not messing with them anymore. Now, these guys have been sacked by Israel. Just look how quickly they're falling down. Okay? Even though it's going to be a couple hundred years before northern Israel taken into captivity and like 350 years before Judah is taken in captivity, they start going downhill overnight. I mean, Egypt wouldn't have dared invaded Israel in the days of Solomon and David. Definitely not. But in the days of Rehoboam, they just come in and just punk them out for all their gold. Northern Israel is now half invaded by Arameans, and then they have a 5-year civil war, and they can't even take one city of the Philistines who've been completely weakened by David and Solomon. So what's going on? Everybody's making a comeback because Israel sucks and they're squabbling and God is against them, basically. So in the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, began Omri to reign over Israel 12 years. 6 years he reigned in Tirzah, and he bought the hill of Samaria of Shemer. So this is why Samaria is called Samaria. For 2 talents of silver. That's not yeah, I guess it is. Talents like 60 pounds of silver. So it's 120 pounds of silver. That's quite a bit of money. And he built on the hill, and he called the name of the city which he built after the name of Shemer, the owner of the hill. He called it Samaria. So this is why Samaria is called Samaria. But Omri wrought evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did worse than all the men that were before him, for he walked in the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and in the sin which he made Israel to sin, to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger with their vanities. Now the rest of the acts of Omri which he did, and his might that he showed, are they not written in the books of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? So Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria, and Ahab his son reigned in his stead. And this is where you're going to get into Ahab and Jezebel. And these are the big deal ones. I think I'm going to stop there just because I've covered a lot. When I edit this, it probably won't be quite as long. But Ahab and Jezebel is quite a involved story. And Ahab and Jezebel is going to cover about half of 1 Kings and about half of 2 Kings. It's a lot. Ahab and Jezebel, and then Jehu finally overthrowing them. And it's going to be in the days of Jehu's grandson that the other prophets are going to start. So I think I'm just going to do this. We'll leave that there because we're at Omri and the house of Ahab being set up. I'll just finish this chapter here. He says, and Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord, and above all that were before him. And it came to pass, as if he had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam and the sons of Nebat, that he took to wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. and he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, than all the kings that were before him. In his days did Hiel the Bethelite build Jericho. So remember how when Jericho was torn down, they said whoever rebuilds it is going to lay the foundations with the blood of their one son and the walls with the blood of their other son. He says he laid the foundation thereof with Abiram his firstborn, and set up the gates thereof with his youngest son Segub, according to the word of the Lord which he spoke by Joshua the son of Nun. So this is basically he's cursing whoever rebuilds Jericho. So remember, they tried to build Ramah, they weren't successful. Now he's rebuilding Jericho, because remember, his goal is trying to get all the trade from northern Israel to not be able to go into southern Israel. That's the goal. So since he failed to build Ramah, he's now building Jericho. Okay? If you understand supply lines and politics, it's very simple. These are the roads into, you could still go there from Gilgal, because you see Gilgal connects after Jericho, but what he's really trying to do is dictate who can and can't come into Judah, essentially. Because Judah is surrounded by enemies for the most part. I mean, you have the Philistines, which they've kind of subdued, but they've been punked out by the Egyptians, so are the Philistines going to make a comeback? The Edomites are definitely starting to make a comeback. And they're in northern Israel, and what these moves they're making with these cities they're trying to get is about blocking in northern Israel, so they can't really trade with any outside powers and get rich. So if they don't have Joppa, well, then they don't have any port cities, because the Philistines are going to be like, sure, you guys, you were once great in the days of Solomon, you can use our ports. So they still have the port of Eilat, or it's I forget what it's called, but it's basically Aqaba down in the south on the Red Sea. But they don't have access to any ports in the north anymore, like Solomon did. So you're just seeing them decline. Both kingdoms, though, are going into decline very, very fast. I mean, we're between 50 and 75 years from Solomon is all, and they are a skeleton of their former selves. Even though they've had the money and they've probably had a lot of building and their cities are nicer and more fortified, they are effectively down to what they were in the days of Judges, with the different kingdoms running through the land, and they don't have a unified Israel, and they don't have control of all the promised land anymore. You have these Arameans in the north just running ragged, and I mean, they just besieged and struck Dan and Naphtali and all these guys in the north. So all this stuff in the north, they've overrun it. What does that mean? Are they pillaging it? It looks that way, because it looks like the armies are preoccupied with fighting for who's in charge here, controlling these highlands, trying to block the way to Judah, and then trying to take this Philistine city. There's no record of these guys going back and getting this. Now they will in the days of Elisha, because God's going to strike the Arameans, and so they are going to turn it around a little bit, despite themselves. But they are in just a steady decline here. So the next one I do, again, because there was a lot of backstory around this, I didn't cover a ton of Bible here. I think I did 6 chapters is all. The next one I'm going to be flying through, and because this is mostly going to take place in the days of Ahab and Jezebel and then their children, and Athaliah is going to almost wipe out the house of David. But there's a lot going on in this next section, which is really just like another 30-year period, but there's just a lot going on. And Elijah and Elisha are both in this period. So we've seen like this steady strain of prophets. Not all of them are named. There's a few that aren't named, but you do have regular named prophets going on here. You just don't have prophetic books being written by these guys. Or if we did have prophecies written by these guys, they were fulfilled here, and so we don't. We just have the main point of the prophecy fulfilled. It's like they're going to mention Jonah in the days of Jeroboam II, and they're going to mention a prophecy that he gives, but we're not going to see where it's written or where he gives it or whatever. It's not in the book of Jonah. And then those books start to come in that day. So chapter 17 is where we start with Elijah and Ahab and Jezebel and Elisha, all the way down to Jehu, who overthrows them. And you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric about this in America right now. Don't fall for any of it. It's all gross, okay? But if you look at your secular history, so your early church fathers, guys like, what is his name? Not Ephraim the Syrian, Tatian the Assyrian, and Theophilus of Antioch. They're going to read all these histories that were written by Greeks and Phoenicians, and they go back to the time of Jezebel. And what you find out is that Jezebel is from a family that in the generation or so before them overthrew the kings of Tyre. So you have the king of Tyre actually has a daughter that's married to Solomon. It doesn't say that she's a Sidonian. We don't really have mention of this daughter, but the king of Tyre is obviously friends with Solomon. And this is Hiram, king of Tyre, seems to get a visit from Menelaus, who is responsible for sacking Troy and the siege of Troy. And then it's going to be roughly a couple generations after him that basically the priesthood, which is where Jezebel is from, kills the royal family and takes over. And Jezebel's aunt is going to be, I think she's still from that other house. I could be mistaken, but they're going to go and found Carthage. It's not that long around this time. So think about this: is the city of Carthage, which is going to eventually produce Hannibal, and they're going to fight with the Romans, is just being established around the time that Jezebel is being married to Ahab. And that seems to be somewhat tied to the fact that this wicked family of sons of Baal, worshippers of Baal, are going to take over. Now think of Baal as, like, again, this is a corruption of the Lord showing up to Job in a storm. Baal and Dagon, and the Mesopotamian name for him is Hadad. This is why you have all these kings named Hadad. Baal Hadad literally means Lord Hadad. It's just merging the two names together. You're going to see Greeks doing that, where they're going to call it Ammon Zeus, because apparently Ammon is the Egyptian version and Zeus is the Greek version. Zeus, Baal, all these people is the storm god. So it's a corruption of Yahweh. That's who Baal is. That's who they worship. And then Ashtoreth is going to be their main goddess. So this is their version of, remember how the Israelites put together the sun god, the serpent, and the bull god? This is them putting together the storm god and then the woman who produced the Nephilim. So it's all these same stories getting corrupted again and again and again. But the point is, it's taking something that's based on something true and then mixing it with something that's evil and replacing God with that. And so that's Baal and Ashtoreth. Baal and Ashtoreth are kind of like a version of God and Mary, if you will, or Christ and the church to them. It's because one is obviously giving birth to a half God, half human, and Mary gives birth to the Son of God, right? So they're taking these promises that go back to the Garden of Eden and all this stuff, and they're corrupting them, and they're coming up with these new gods. And again, Jezebel's family is from the priesthood that's over that religion in Sidonia, in Sidon. So that's why she's going to bring that religion in a big way into Israel, because it's her family's tradecraft, essentially. It's their religion. So we're going to start here. We're going to read through the end to 22, so that's 5 chapters of that. And then we're going to go into... We're probably going to read all the way up to 2 Kings 11. So we're going to do something like 16 chapters, but it's going to cruise by pretty fast because these chapters are like 20 verses long. And that is going to really cover till the end of the house of Ahab, because the house of Ahab almost entirely destroys both Judah and Israel. That's how bad it is. But it's going to cover a lot. And again, that's going to pretty much cover the lifetime of Elijah and Elisha. And I would assume that all the prophetic content of this period is coming from Elijah and Elisha. But you're going to see, that's 16 chapters dedicated to them. Out of, if you consider the whole books are about 50 chapters, it's less than 50 chapters. To have 16, about a third of all of Kings is dedicated to the house of Ahab and Elijah and Elisha and that contest between them. They do both carry on for quite some time, but it goes pretty fast. And then after that, what we're going to see is a very quick death spiral after that, after the house of Jehu, because when Jehu takes over, God is going to tell him, your family's going to rule until the 4th generation, because Jehu is kind of righteous, but he's going to be like, your family's going to rule to the 4th generation, and that's it. And then after that, it's just overthrow after overthrow after overthrow, and then they're dead. So you don't really have any more like anointed kings after Jehu. So the only ones of all these kings that you really have chosen by God to be king, rather than just allowed by God to be king, is going to be Jeroboam and Jehu. And then the rest of them are crap. And they're both going to do the exact same thing wrong. They're going to keep the golden calves there, and that's how they just keep failing. So hope you guys are blessed by that. Again, this series is going to be called The Decline and Fall of Israel. And I'm going to get through these portions of Kings pretty quickly, because in the days of Jeroboam, that's when we start getting into the prophets. And so we're going to probably look at the northern Israel prophets first, which is going to be Hosea, Jonah, and Amos all together. They're really not that long if you get all of them. I mean, combined, you're probably looking at 15, 20 chapters. And then we're going to look at Joel and Isaiah and Micah in southern Israel. Or in Judah, and you're going to understand how these prophets are prophesying to both houses about what's going to happen, mostly surrounding the Assyrian invasion, and then Isaiah is going to extend beyond that and prophesy Babylon and Cyrus and all that too. And then Nehemiah, Zephaniah, Jeremiah, Habakkuk, all those guys are going to be after that. So I think this series, if we're getting through all the prophets and everything as well, could take a few months, but I'm probably going to take a break to go to India, so we're probably going to be into next year by the time I'm done with all this. And then I'm going to start hopefully in a few weeks, at least right before I go to India, I might start on Matthew, because we're going to start the New Testament and be doing them both parallel. So hope you guys are blessed by this. Hope you, again, if you have any questions about the time period of that, throw them in the comment section. It'll kind of keep me focused as I'm going forward. But I hope you guys are blessed by this and have a great rest of your weekend. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.